All right, it's been a while since I've talked about Caitlin Clark. It's been a while since she's played basketball, publicly at least, and I've been trying to keep my attention focused on what goes on the court right now. But this video was sent to me by a subscriber. They knew I would be interested in it because obviously I'm a fan of Caitlin Clark and Juju Watkins, and this video pertains to both of them. It's called "Why Can't Juju Move the Needle Like Caitlin Clark?" And I mean, let's just go ahead and watch it. I haven't watched it at all. I haven't taken even a sneak preview, so we're watching this together. Let's go.
Hey, this can be an uncomfortable fumble of the week, but I'm going to try not to let it be.
Okay.
Last college women's basketball season, Samaria, Caitlin Clark had the sport by the throat. Iowa women's basketball was must-see TV, and if they were in a town, it was packed out in that arena, okay? The fan investment into Caitlin followed her to the WNBA, and viewership numbers for her games were sky high. Her mere presence alone helped several teams break attendance records, and in some instances, teams chose to actually move games to larger venues to accommodate the fanfare of Caitlin coming to town. Coming into this season, the biggest name in women's college basketball is unquestionably Juju Watkins. The star from USC is the frontrunner for Player of the Year, and her team is on a very short list of programs with a legitimate shot to win a title. Juju's game is absolutely cold. Currently, she's averaging 21, 7, and 5, and I mean no intent to sexualize her at all when I say this, but she is also drop dead gorgeous. But none of that has translated into the kind of excitement and fan investment that Caitlin had just a season ago. So listen up. In a Trojan home game in Juju's hometown of LA, a city with 4 million people, in an arena with 10,000 capacity, only 3,000 people showed up. Iowa's preseason games last year had more fans than that. Now, granted, I recognize that it is very early in the season, and their last two opponents were mid-majors, but it doesn't feel like the world and mainstream media has embraced her quite like it did Caitlin. And so my fumble of the week is going to Juju Watkins fans who only support her online via tweets. Samaria, my question for you is, why does it feel like Juju isn't moving the needle the same way that Caitlin did and does?
Okay. Ooh, that's tough. I'm hearing this for the first time, guys. I think for one, you got to remember that Caitlin Iowa went pretty far both years that she had this stardom. So obviously she lost to LSU in the championship game, and then she came back the next year and it was just crazy. She also had an antagonist, right?
Okay.
In Angel Reese when she was playing. And so I think that allowed, unfortunately, and I hate that allowed a lot of people to want to root for her. And so I don't think that Juju has that storyline. So maybe she can get it. I don't know. Like maybe, race played a factor in it too. I hate to go there, but I think that she just doesn't have that same storyline. Like everything lined up perfectly for Caitlin to be this all-American superstar. For one, she's always on SportsCenter because she's made some crazy shot. And for two, she lost in the championship game. Like I just mentioned, everybody remembers Angel, talking about the ring. And that is a perfect storyline for people to eat it up. You're going to be on one side or the other. And I also think that just her fans rose to the occasion and they came out of the woodwork. So I do agree that Juju's fans should get fumble of the week because they need to stand up too. But I think nationally, maybe that's the reason why she doesn't have the level of stardom like Caitlin Clark did.
Nationally, I can understand it. I wouldn't expect her to show up in Wisconsin and, for the fanfare to be what it was for Caitlin in Wisconsin. But in her city, in LA, I would expect more of a raucous turnout for her games, regardless of who she is playing against. And this is kind of why I always say, like, social media is not a real indicator of the real world, because it's a terrible barometer to measure how someone is actually impacting things, right? Because if you go online, you'll see fanfare and you'll see all of these things, but if it does not translate to actual butts and seats, if it does not actually translate to physical sales, then it's a farce. And sometimes in our community, we get so caught up in the bubble of what we see by our very curated algorithms that we think that what we are doing is of the utmost importance and is of the thing that the masses are aligned with. It's how the election last week was just decided, right? Like nobody by and large, in our community, foresaw the election going quite that way. But because we were in this curated bubble, we had no understanding of the true impact and effect of what Donald Trump had on the rest of this country. And so a lot of the conversation around Caitlyn last year was that, she's not the only one. There's other people, and Juju's going to be able to drive the same kind of, and it doesn't happen like that. It doesn't happen like that. And whiteness is so overwhelming. There's so many more white people in this country. And when they take an investment into somebody, they actually show up. And unfortunately, sometimes in our community, we do lip service and we do Twitter finger service, but we don't actually show up in a real meaningful way, in a way that is tangible, that creates tangible results for the person that we say that we love so much. Listen, I'm a fan. I love Juju. I see her sometimes around LA. I think she's spectacular. I think from a basketball standpoint, she's brilliant. She had a historical season last year. She'll probably have another one this year. Her team is phenomenal. They have some great transfers and some freshmen that are coming in. And I hope that she has all the success in the world. But there is something to be said about the fact that we are not showing up the way that we be saying online that we are. And that's all I gotta say. That's why the fans get the fumble of the week. You all let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. Is there something to be said about the way that black fans are showing up or not showing up for Juju rather, which is very different than the way white fans did for Caitlyn? Let us know your thoughts about this in the comment section. I am really interested to hear your perspectives.
Where do I even start with this? First of all, you notice that he compared last season, what the Iowa Hawkeyes did last year at their exhibition game, when they had 55,000 fans out there. That was Caitlyn's junior year. And then the young lady on this video, she spoke about Caitlyn Clark's last 2 years, her junior and senior season. We can't compare those seasons to what Juju Watkins is doing right now, 4 games into her sophomore year. Her sophomore season doesn't even start really until today against Notre Dame. And he did say that it is early in her season, but you can't even compare. Even once we get to the end of the season, you can't compare it at all. Caitlyn Clark, for instance, the Iowa Hawkeyes, her very last season, they had 14,000 in average home attendance. The year before that, junior year, 11,000, over 11,000 in average home attendance. The year before that, her sophomore season, over 8,000 in average attendance. So it's gone up. Juju Watkins hasn't had a chance to do that yet. As well as those championship games, being on record watch. She was going to break Kelsey Plum's record, Pete Maravich's record, all the records. That all comes later on in your career. Right now, Juju's not on record watch. Like, towards the end of her career, maybe she will be. So basically, what she was saying there is correct. Caitlyn Clark had time to develop storylines. She was going for records. She had made deep tournament runs, had a chance to come up with rivals. Right now, there's no rival that you can name for Juju Watkins besides, UCLA perhaps, because they're just in-state rivals. But yeah, she had time to develop all of that. Juju's story is just still being written. We also have to look at the fact that LA and Iowa, two completely different worlds. Juju has moved the needle as far as tripling attendance since she's been there at the Galen Center, but where they started and where, Caitlyn Clark came and took Iowa from, two entirely different places. They did sell out USC versus UCLA last year. They did break the record at the Galen Center last year when UCLA came to USC. So both of those USC and UCLA games were huge. But the rest of the games, not as much. And Iowa, it's not just about Caitlyn Clark. Look at the numbers for Iowa State, for example. They're number 3, right behind number 2 Iowa in average home attendance. They average over 10,000 a game. Is that because Caitlyn Clark is great? Is that because Audie Crooks and Brown just have these great personalities and their star power? Or is it because Iowa is basketball crazy, women's college basketball crazy to be exact, and they travel? Nobody's leaving LA for a game versus, like you said, Wisconsin in December. Nobody's leaving LA to go see them play against Iowa in January or whenever they play. This is all during the winter months. Nobody's leaving LA to come see these games. So yeah, there's a huge difference. You can't really look at attendance. Even once Juju Watkins gets to her junior and senior year, I mean, we know the difference in pro teams in LA versus not in Iowa. There's a lot of differences between the two places, right? We could spend a whole video just talking about the differences between LA and Iowa, but I think I've said enough. If you look at UCLA and USC, you look at Iowa and Iowa State, it's a world apart. World apart in the amount of support they get, the amount of attention they get, the amount of attendance that they get, and so on. So that's going to always exist for Juju Watkins being an LA native. Now, I've also seen some people say that it comes down to style of play. I would disagree with that. Well, to a point. The logo threes, it did bring in a lot of casual fans. It did. A lot of hardcore basketball fans are actually tired of some of the threes, honestly. That's why they're turning away from the NBA and looking more towards, college basketball and the WNBA. For me, players who are just mid-range masters like Lucy Olsen, the footwork that I see between dribbles on Juju Watkins, I could just watch her shuffle her feet and then change directions. That gets me out of my seat. All right, logo threes is cool. It's cool. I've seen it a lot. I like when Caitlyn does it, but for me, I like when she breaks somebody down first and then goes into the logo threes. I like when she takes somebody all the way to the rack and gets an and one. I like a lot more than just the logo threes. So I see a lot of comments saying it's the style of play, it's the logo threes that got us in here. That's a you thing. That's a you thing. A lot of people who love basketball, they love handles. They love, turnaround jumpers and the fluidity that you do it with, what your footwork looks like. That's why we like Kobe. We like his footwork and his skills. It's not just the threes when it comes to Steph Curry. People like the handle and the way that he gets it off the dribble. So there's more to it than just logo threes and style of play. Juju Watkins, her handle, I mean, it can be tighter, but just watching her change directions, shift speeds, for me, it's a great thing to watch. I can't speak for everybody else. I see a lot of people saying they've seen it before. Name it. You'd have to name it. I haven't seen players like Juju Watkins. I haven't seen players like Caitlin Clark. I haven't seen players like Malaysia Fulwiley. There's a few I can name. Performance, production is what it starts with. Never mind style of play. Is when you see 31 and 8, that's going to get a lot of people's attention. When you see 27, 8 and 8, that's going to get a lot of people's attention. And so the same with Juju. When people saw 51 at Stanford last season, it didn't matter if it came on threes, pull up twos, how it came. Just watching the highlights was enough for a lot of people to get excited and say, whoa, she's filling it up out there with the 51. So maybe we're all different when it comes to style of play. Obviously, we're all different when it comes to style of play, right? But I don't think that's the big separator between the two. I don't think so at all. I think it's more to do with, like I said, time. Juju Watkins hasn't had the time to make her second, third, fourth Deep March tournament run, have these big games against who knows which schools. Just hasn't had the time to have that happen. Hasn't gotten really close to the championship and then lost and then had everybody invested in that redemption tour the next season, like we saw with Caitlin Clark's senior year. There's a lot that goes into it, right? And she hasn't had that yet. If we just compare freshman year to freshman year, and like I said, we can't really because they didn't really have fans during Caitlin Clark's freshman season. But if we just look at impact nationally, freshman season versus freshman season, I think they're right neck and neck. All right. Also, I've seen a lot of people on the Caitlin Clark side of this debate say that Caitlin Clark just has the intangibles, the it factor, the personality that Juju Watkins doesn't have. But I think she has a lot of charisma. There's a California coolness to her, a lot of charisma, but she is 19. Caitlin Clark at 22, at 21, after answering questions from the same reporters for years, after having hundreds of interviews and just kind of being used to this. Entirely different player than she was 5 games into her sophomore season. Entirely different player. The comfortability, the off the cuff humor, that comes with maturity. I think the natural charisma is there when it comes to Juju Watkins, but the comfortability is a whole different thing. Once we see that, then we'll see a different side of her, or we'll see more of what we've already seen from her. But I think she has a great personality, honestly. Also, with women's basketball right now just being more popular in general than it was in Caitlin Clark's freshman and sophomore year, there's a lot more attention being given to players earlier on in their careers. And so, with Juju Watkins, for example, it did her no favors for a reporter to come and ask her, who do you think is going to be the rookie of the year? Or who do you think is the rookie of the year so far? Nobody asked Caitlin Clark that during her sophomore year and then caused like a split or division in her fans. She was able to just play basketball, but somebody went up to Juju Watkins with a microphone and made her lose some fans. I saw during a Big Ten media day, there was a girl she was doing an interview with. She had the nerve to ask her, who do you take it last? Who do you want to take the last shot, Kobe Bryant or LeBron James? That pissed me off so bad. Juju Watkins smiled through it, and she answered the question eventually, but that made me so mad. Like, what do you think Juju Watkins has to gain by asking her that question? Where her fan base is in LA, and half of them are Kobe fans, half of them are LeBron fans. Absolutely nothing. But there was nobody with a microphone in Caitlin Clark's face as a sophomore trying to divide her Iowa fan base. Not that they could. Not that they could. But nobody was trying to do that. And so So to me, there's just a lot that's not the same that you can't make a apples to apples comparison. For me, I think they're both great in their own ways. I think attendance will eventually get up at USC. It'll never reach the levels of Iowa. I have them both in the same basket as the new wave of women's basketball that I'm excited about. Two personalities, their values, their parents, everything about them. I'm behind and I like it. And I'm tired of people trying to pit one against the other because just like I said about the LA fan base, right, with the Kobe and LeBron question, every time somebody tries to put Juju Watkins up against Caitlin Clark, all they're doing is costing her more and more fans. Because you have some people who are so dug in the trench on nobody will ever touch Caitlin Clark that they don't even want to hear that comparison being made. They're automatically going to just push Juju Watkins down a notch no matter what she does now going forward. They don't want to hear it. You've already messed up by comparing her to Caitlin Clark. And so I just think none of this does her any favors, personally. I just wish people would let them both just exist in their world. They get along, right? Caitlin Clark is offered to be her mentor. I wish people would just stop doing this comparison thing. Stop asking Juju Watkins, Kobe, or LeBron. Stop pitting her up against Caitlin Clark. Let her bloom. Let her bloom.